Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Jonesboro. Our inspirational moment from Audrey Hepburn. You have two hands, one to help yourself, the second to help others. It's my pleasure to introduce Matt Knight to you. We've been friends since junior high school. That was a long time ago, too. Matt is currently the associate pastor of First United Methodist Church in Jonesboro. He grew up in Jonesboro and is a graduate of Jonesboro High School and Arkansas State University with a degree in education and a master's degree in counseling, psychology, and family studies from the University of Tennessee. He's a licensed professional counselor and has over 30 years experience in mental health services. He provides education, consulting, motivational presentations across the United States. In addition, he has been a junior and senior high school teacher, the administrator of a private school, started two businesses, written music in Nashville, produced an award-winning motion picture, and traveled extensively. His first book, Leaving Fingerprints, is available on Amazon. Matt will share with us how not only First United Methodist Church has been affected by COVID, but churches in general, and how First Methodist is reaching out to parishioners during this pandemic. Matt Knight.
It is a pleasure to be here. So about a year and 3/4 ago, when March hit, I had about a year's worth of travel ahead of me, going and speaking in different places, and all that collapsed. And I'm sure that maybe some of the businesses that were around you were certainly affected. Maybe your business was affected. But basically, I lost about $35,000 just like that. So I tell my wife, said, we're going to have to tighten up, honey. And tighten up, and my wife, they just don't understand that whatsoever. But at the same time, I was going, I think I'm going to retire. And she goes, you're crazy. And I go, no, I really think that I want to do something different now. And she said, well, I hope you have something in mind. And I said, well, I have a couple of things in mind. And she said, that's not good enough. And I said, well, it'll be okay. And she said, okay. So, man, I turned in my resignation and retired for 2 full weeks. And John Miles at the First Methodist Church said, hey, how would you like to be on staff here at the church and do what you do? And I said, I would absolutely love it. So if you were feeling nervous for me about being unemployed, it's okay. I actually have a job now. It is so strange, though, after working actually about 40 years in mental health, and then have somebody call you pastor. And you know, a lot of people come to that position with a lot of life experience. I hope I'm going to say this politically correct. And some of my life experience, Gary, has been far from pastoral. Don't laugh, some of yours too, come on. And but at the same time, I think it's given me a real perspective on who people are. It's always afforded me well when I was doing therapy and counseling. And so that's how I got here today. And this is the second, but the first group that I've spoken to since all of that started. So I'm real excited to be here. I want to start out with just some general remarks. If you've been through anything in the last year and a half, more than that now, then you know that you've been through trauma. We say the word trauma, and sometimes we think about, horrible things, and some of it has been horrible, but like we may think of somebody coming back from war or recovering from a tragic injury, and that certainly is trauma. But trauma is very different. Trauma is when your whole life is starting to be rearranged. And how many of you found that during COVID, at least a chunk of your life got rearranged? Absolutely it did. And all the ways that we usually did things, we couldn't do them anymore. And what that really represents is a loss of control. Isn't it interesting? We thought we were in control, and it takes a virus to prove that we're not. But I brought evidence of COVID. Remember when you first wore this? Remember when we began to get very creative and we made designer masks? Did everybody here have a mask besides this? Yes. So let's say all of this goes away in 2 years. That does not mean it goes away. And so there's this thing, and I want to be sure that I tell you right, and I'm not going to sit here. I've got some real great news. It's called this. It's called foreboding joy. Doesn't seem like those two words go together. So, okay, how many of you, besides the dark stuff that may have happened, how many of you were able to find some places of joy in the last year and a half? I hope you have. I hope that's really important. And so we go through something like this, and we get to this place where we are starting to have hope and joy and thinking, things are going to go on. And then we hear the word variant. And we hear that because we don't know what it's going to do. And could we be more divided as a group of people in the whole world? Could we be more divided? I mean, we are more divided. I've lived a long time, and we're more divided than I've ever seen us. And boy, we just want to be divided over everything. Throw that in on top of the trauma. If we can be divided over something, we will be. And then, of course, if you listen to the news is divided. If you have strong opinions about things, then you'll get divided. And it's one of the reasons I'm really glad that I'm part of the church, because I really hope that we are doing something to get past that and get up here where we really begin to see one another. My youngest son would grab my face and he would say, "Daddy, look at me, see me." And I've been thinking about that. I'm sure in this room, there's a lot of very strong opinions about so many things. But what if I just want to see you? What if I don't care what you do? What if I don't care if we agree on something or not? What if I want to see you, a person, who you are? And if I can begin to do that, then some of this other stuff begins to fall away. And in my belief system, you guys, I don't know of a better place for that to happen than in the church. Because in the church, there's three things that you can find. And I realize that I'm probably talking to a lot of different beliefs here. But in the church, there's three things that you can find. And you can find forgiveness. And this is a season for forgiveness. You can find it for yourself, and you can be helped by God to give that to another person. You can find identity. We have this scripture, and it says, if man is in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things are passed away, all things become new. And so there is a chance to start over. And boy, don't we need a chance to start over. And also in the church, hopefully, you can find a place to be loved. And we need that probably more than anything else. So, that was a side trip. It's not in the notes, excuse me. And if it sounded like preaching, that is fine. I do a lot of that these days. And at the end, if you would like to make those checks payable to the Matt Knight Cancun Fund, that would be wonderful. I will go and lay before the Lord, and then when I'm done on that side, I'll turn over and lay on the other side, and I'll send you photographs about how much good I'm doing in a foreign country. Okay. So let me ask you this. Okay. So what happens when I do this? all you can see is what? My eyes. And so how much expression in communication do we do from here down? A great deal. I mean, you can say the same thing smiling, but by the time you say it through your mask, it may not come out as smiling. So we've had a big cringe in our communication. Oh, and I came on staff at the church right in the middle of COVID. And so everybody was wearing masks. And I have trouble remembering names anyway. And now they're half covered up on their face, so I just gave up. But you know how I identify you? It's your face. And when we cover them up, then we lose part of the way we identify with one another. We couldn't touch one another. 6 feet apart. The average person, there's been so much study on this, the average person needs to be touched by another human being that you want to touch you, and allowed to touch another human being who wants you to touch them. We need that. It feeds us physically and psychologically and spiritually. So much research has been done about that, but 6 feet now. And we were beginning to isolate ourselves a little at a time. And then what happens if you had to be quarantined? Now you're really isolated. And what happens when they tell you you can't have church, you can't have school, you can't go to work, you're going to have to do it online, and now you are very, very isolated. And you guys, during this time, abuse, both adult abuse and child abuse, and it hasn't stopped. Self-harm, suicide, and when all went up, and so did depression and anxiety. People that didn't even know they could have depression and anxiety started having depression and anxiety. So right before I came here, a friend of mine came in the office and says, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go talk to the Rotary. I'm going to talk about what happened to our church." And they go, "Oh, that's great. So tell me about it." And so I just started saying some of the things I've said to you. And she said, "Matt, please stop." And I said, "What? Are you okay?" And she goes, "I didn't realize how much I can't hear that right now." And guys, that's trauma. It's when you start to feel joy, but then start to be prepared not to feel joy. And that's when you know you have trauma. It's when you begin to feel depressed about things that never depressed you before, or maybe anxious or frightened about things. If you lost a job during this, as one of our church members did, they were terrified for 2 months about how they were going to take care of their family, and they were quickly going through their savings. That is a terrifying event. Now they've got a new job. It's a whole lot better. As a matter of fact, they are very thankful almost now that they lost that other job and to find this one. But do you know what? If all of a sudden this started to look shaky, how do you think they're going to feel emotionally when that happens? It's not just the appropriate emotion that a person might have, but now it's multiplied because it's happened before. So I guess what I'm saying, guys, please pay attention to yourselves. We've been through a very difficult time, and pay attention. And I'm going to give you about 4 things at the end that I know really address some of this and can help you stay between the ditches. But most of all, if you get to a place where you know it's affecting you, you aren't sleeping, or it's difficult to concentrate, to do your job, please tell somebody. And I'm going to offer this. I am such a neutral ground now, it's not even funny. But you can call me at the church. We'll talk, and I'll tell you who's really good at doing some counseling if you need to. And it wouldn't be long-term counseling. So I want you to know you have that open door. That's a very difficult doorway for people to walk through. So, the church. Well, we determined as a staff, with our mask on, by the way, we determined as a staff that we were not going to shut down. And so how could we not shut down? Well, immediately we had the technology to go online. So we went online. And so if I was going to preach, and I normally was preaching to a group this size, and then all of a sudden it's me in an auditorium, and I've got the praise band right here, about 5 praise band members. It is very different than when you speak to a group. All of us had to get different. We had to somehow see people. We even put up some pictures on the chair so that it would look like there were people that were there. It is a big adjustment, a lot more than I thought that it would be. So we made that adjustment. We said, we're not going to close. We're going to keep on. We put it online. And then came Easter. And we thought, you know what? We got to see some people. So we came up with the idea that everybody would stay in their cars. We'd go to St. Bernard's parking lot. We'd put up a platform. We'd have a service there. And it was where this term, maybe you had this also, but it was where a term in our church called honkalooya. Instead of hallelujah, honkalooya. So if somebody heard something they like, and we aren't a real demonstrative group as Methodists, okay? But if somebody heard something they'd like, they'd lay down on that horn. It was really good. But the most wonderful thing is to look across the parking lot, and even if I just saw you in your car, I've seen you, and I haven't seen you for a long time, and I could wave, and there was some sense of communion in that. We even had communion in little cups. We still do. It's awesome. I don't know if you've seen these or not, but they have little loaves of bread on one side and juice on the other. And that's what we use, and we're going to keep using them, it looks like, for a while. We moved out of that parking lot, and we moved into the 2 parking lots behind our church on Union. And we built this huge platform in front of what we call Wesley Hall. And we had church there. And it was wonderful. We only got rained out once. It was so good. God was good to us with weather. And then by Christmas, we decided that we would be back inside. Now, actually, the Christmas Eve service we did back in the parking lot because we knew that so many people would be coming. But we did communion and everything on the Christmas Eve service. It was just wonderful. But we were back in the building. Now, back in the building, if you've gone to a public place during that time, you know that's 6 feet apart. That's about 2 chairs or 3 chairs. You could sit as a family. Everybody had to wear masks. And so everybody, you know what? They wanted to be back very badly. And so our numbers started changing so that about half the normal attendance started showing up and about half were online. Although, think what happens in a year. Think what happens in a year. You used to sitting up in your pajamas with a cup of coffee and maybe some breakfast watching church online. Does it get better than that? Well, at least for a while it seems that way. And so we are still seeing people that are finally saying, you know what, we got to give up Sunday morning sitting around watching online, and we've got to come back. And we're seeing that trend right now. During that time, it was very difficult for me because one of the ministries that I'm over is making sure people that are in nursing homes, making sure people that are shut-ins, making sure people that are in the hospital were visited, and we couldn't go do that. And it was so wonderful when that began to open up. One of our parishioners who is in a nursing home, I went to see him last week, and he said, Matt, would you please tell people to come visit me? He goes, I have a lot of friends in the church, and would you please tell them to come see me? It's been so lonely here. And there's that kind of need. And what a wonderful opportunity. You know, you don't have to know anybody in a nursing home. If you just want to go out and visit somebody, you can do that. And it's a wonderful way to get you out of you and maybe giving to somebody else. And I know that's important to Rotary. Our daycare at the church barely survived. Had it not been for the government money that we got, it might have had to stop. And it's had to stop a couple of times. because a child would show up with, or a family member of a child would show up with COVID, or we had a nursery worker that showed up with COVID. But we've been very fortunate. We have had very little COVID that has actually been in our church. And when it was, a lot, and the people we lost to COVID were primarily those that had existing condition, and COVID exacerbated it and brought about their death. So weddings, funerals, graveside, everybody standing far apart. No funerals in the church. Weddings, we could have weddings, but everybody was very far apart. And then there was a whole season where we couldn't, and people would just come and be married after their little dream weddings couldn't be anymore. So this was tough. This is tough things for a church to go through. Be sure I've kind of covered everything. Giving. This was absolutely amazing. People not only gave what they had promised, but they gave beyond that. And our giving did not dip once. Is that not amazing? It just is, it's telling you where people's hearts were even when they weren't there. As a matter of fact, we built a new building. Maybe some of you have seen that. And by the way, if you'd like a tour, I'm the official tour guide. But the pledges for that, we were very concerned. And the money even came in beyond those pledges. So we were blessed. However, I want to tell you that the Methodist Church at large, ours is a very successful story compared to some of the other places. Some of the smaller Methodist churches, they did not survive. And there was already a shortage of ministers to appoint to these churches, and many of them during this time just decided, I'm going to retire. Let's see. All our services are back. They're going full blown. The one that has not come back to almost a pre-COVID level is our 9:45 service. So we have two services on Sunday morning that are contemporary. And by that, I mean, it's done in our Wesley Hall in a comfortable setting. We have praise and worship as opposed to hymns. We have two other services that are traditional, and they both are in our chapel and our main building, and they are more formal Methodist services, liturgy, hymns that we would have done when I was growing up in that church. And then there's this, the last two I'll tell you about. We have two wild cards. And we have two recovery ministries that are associated with our church. This is a very unique situation. And you guys, they're called Breaking Bonds in His Wings. Both of them are showing a 70% recovery rate even after 2 years. And that's miraculous. If you get a 30% recovery rate after 2 years, after 1 year, you feel like you're doing good. So what's the difference here? Well, it's really detailed programs in which they get men and women to rediscover who they really are and to give them a meaning and a purpose scripturally, but also just train them in a lot of life skills. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. That would be a good program to maybe even sometime in the future have one of those groups come and talk to you. It would be quite an amazing program. But guys, the minute the doors opened, they were back. And they were running 350, 400 people on Tuesday night. This is when you're supposed to have mask and sit 6 feet apart. And most of the mask, we gave a mask away. We asked them to sit 6 feet apart. But I mean, they're living with one another, so they sit in groups. That's fine. And so I learned from my recovery ministry the proper way to wear a mask. Except when you're going to sing. And now it's this. But the most absolutely incredible thing, all through the main of COVID, nobody in those services got sick. And there'll be a lot of people in those services that'll be the ones that'll say, I'm not getting a shot. Didn't get it then, not going to get it now. And it's not because they're trying to be difficult, they're finding themselves. By the way, when you don't have anything else left to lose, when you've been a prostitute on the street, when you've been a guy that was selling drugs to anybody that you could sell drugs to, when you walked around on some days not wondering how did the needle get in your arm, you can't go any lower than that. But if you don't have anything to lose, then you've got everything to gain, don't you? And to get to start all over again from the ground up and to see people's lives change. So that's been a real highlight for us during COVID. In the time that I have to talk, that's about all that the information I think that you need. I wish I could tell you a whole lot about the church in general. The Methodist Church is getting ready to split into two parts because we're divided as a church. So we are still working all those things out. Questions? Oh, okay. Any questions?
Matt, I have read and also heard conversations at our church that pastors nationwide, regardless of the denominations, it's not particular to any particular denomination, but that they are concerned about, will the people come back? It seems like they're getting to a group that would just rather Zoom in and not take the time to get back to their previous habits of coming in on a regular basis to church. Are you seeing any of that in this area? We totally know that there will be people for quite a while longer that are going to Zoom. They've gotten comfortable with it. And they feel safer by being able to do that. We have older folks in our congregation that even though they've had shots, they don't want to come. So we know we're going to have that population Zoom. But as long as you're there and watching, we can talk to them. We can make sure that we're contacting them during the week or during the month. And so it seems to be working out, Gary. Would you have just a guesstimate as to what that percentage would be that seems to be today kind of a hardcore Zoom group?
The Zoom group, I would say probably is going to represent maybe 25%. I would give or take. We're seeing some of those come back. Yeah. Okay. It's been hard on pastors too, by the way. I'm fortunate that I kind of came in the middle of all of this and I've got other stuff that's cooking, but for just pastors themselves to be cut off from the people that they have served in our case and yours for years, that's a very difficult thing for them.
Here.
To follow up on his conversation, what's the demographic? Is it the older folks? Because what I'm thinking is probably the younger folks are somebody that are going to be more interested on online, on Zoom meetings going forward. I'm just curious. It's more like the older people or the younger people that are watching those Zoom.
I'm going to tell you this. I don't want to leave here. I shot pistols legally. Okay. And I'm really having trouble hearing, period. I'm going to go get this checked out. So could you, I didn't understand your question. I'm so sorry.
Is it like the older folks or the younger crowd
That's going to stay home?
they're using it right now.
Older or younger? That are actually in church. So we're seeing a real mix, The group that has not come back really strong are young parents with young children. And we certainly understand that. If I had young kids, I'm not sure what I'd be doing. And yet they are, the parents will come to a small group that might meet during the week where they can spell each other and still come, but coming as a family is just for some of them not happening yet. We're opening up all our small groups in the fall. And as a matter of fact, we're adding other small groups in the fall. And we have just decided that we're going to move by what we believe is faith and see everything that we can possibly do as a church. If it gets worse, we'll have to make decisions then. But for right now, we're not going to act like that it's going to be bad. We're going to believe that it can be good. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you two things. Yeah, I'm going to tell you two things. One, two. I got a chance to study some trauma recently under Bissell van der Kolk. And I know that may sound like a funny name, but he is the leading researcher in trauma. And here are three things that really help keep you out of the throes of trauma. And it's really funny. The first one is thankfulness. And to be purposefully thankful. And not just to be purposefully thankful, but to be verbally thankful. And to write down at least 5 things a day that you were thankful for, with intent and with purpose, to write those 5 things. It redirects your entire brain. As a matter of fact, in a year of doing that, a lot of brains that normally go negative had started going positive, just with that one thing, thankfulness. The second thing is acts of kindness, deliberate acts of kindness, where you act outside yourself to help someone else, where you say, this day I will do something and I will look back on it and I will say, I did that kindness for another person. And to write down that kindness, to write it down, because it gets into a piece of your brain that you did it. And it really makes a difference how you see yourself. And the final thing is press into those folks that you love. Let them love you back. We've had a time that if it didn't teach us anything else, that we really needed one another. And so while we have this opportunity, please do that. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Matt, thank you very much for that message. Very timely. And our thought for the day from Vivek Murthy. He's an American physician, Vice Admiral, and the current Surgeon General of the United States. Service reaffirms that we have value to add to the world. We're adjourned.